Good evening and welcome to Ashland Select Board meeting for January 19th, 2022. In accordance with the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Chapter 30A, subsection 20, all public meetings are now being conducted remotely following these requirements of the open meeting law. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed by WACA-TV. The town of Ashland, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, is currently following the guidance from the Ashland Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Tonight's Zoom meeting ID is 882-7382-3248, and the passcode for tonight's meeting is 093204. With that, I will officially open tonight's meeting at 7 o'clock. Good evening and welcome. And with that, I will open up citizens' participation. And I see Catherine has Catherine's iPad. So Catherine, good evening.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Jersick, 11 Rodman Road. I'm going to start out by saying Happy New Year. And I think it's probably, some people might consider it too late, but I don't think anyone on the meeting I've seen. So Happy New Year. And it's still January. I have a couple things I'd like to comment about. One thing, I participated in the planning board meeting last week, and it was brought up about I guess it's not really a potential zoning change. There's a zoning change from the state of Massachusetts, but there's a public comment. And I'm wondering if the select board sent a comment to DHCD on that zoning act without talking to the planning board, and if so, why? That's question one.
Okay, not sure if we did. I know we did send a letter to DHCD with respect to that, and I think there was some minor discussions with the planning board, but nothing major with respect to that, Catherine.
Okay, well, so I mean, as a citizen, I think that they're the specialist on that, and I would hope from the planning board that wasn't my understanding that they were consulted at all about it, and so I hope that they will have it on their agenda and offer comment and perhaps include the public on that as well. And then I think I was just sort of curious when that was first discussed, because it showed up on like old new business, and I know you all work hard, right? And there's a lot going on, but the way that was presented, it says review the letter from the board to the Department of Housing and Community Development, in parentheses DHCD. It said nothing about the actual zoning, and I guess I may or may not have seen that, right? And kind of, but I was thinking it was sort of about the inclusionary zoning that we've been talking about for a year. And so I was very, very disappointed at the way that was listed on the agenda, and I know you guys can do better. But related to that is, so I'm wondering when it was discussed, because when we talked about inclusionary zoning several times, like that wasn't brought up at all. So it's just, it doesn't really make sense of how we're not communicating these things, and particularly with the public.
You said exclusionary zoning or inclusionary?
Inclusionary zoning.
Okay, I thought you said exclusionary zoning. Go ahead, Brandy.
So, Kate, I just wanted to address a couple of the things that you had said. So you had asked when we first discussed this. It was actually 2 meetings ago, whatever the date was in December. Now I'm looking at my calendar. I think it was the 15th was our meeting. And so Michael had gone through what the MBTA communities draft. Initially, it was just literally initial thoughts and guidelines on the MBTA communities. And then I was asked by the board to draft a letter based on my work with MAPC and our housing production plan and our current inclusionary zoning. So that was the letter that was drafted. And so that was what was discussed at our last meeting.
So, but without the planning board and without the public process of inclusionary zone.
So basically the letter addresses a few of the main the main issues, one which was no age-restricted housing. Michael can probably speak more to the details on the MBTA community's guidelines, but we were drafting a letter in response to some of the major concerns, which is the distance where the zoning is. So it's not, DHCD had the zoning by right within half a mile of the train station. So we were talking to some of the points about where our downtown was and what should be included in that radius, and also the age-restricted housing, and also pointing to the projects and things that have already been done in the rail transit district, which would be directly applicable to the MBTA communities. So I'm sure Michael.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm going to continue to say I'm extremely disappointed that there wasn't a public part of that, and that it wasn't with the planning board, who are, expertise. And just the week before, you all had a joint meeting with them. I mean, this could be, we can do better. I mean, apparently you don't agree, and that's okay, but I'm insisting that I know we can do better from the public's point of view.
Catherine, if I may, just to add on to what Brandy said, the letter that we received was well after the meeting, the planning board meeting, the joint meeting that we had with them. So we weren't aware of these, that information that was coming down from DHCD and the transit communities that were involved with the MBTA. So when we got that letter, it was, I think, was it the day before? Was it the day of our select board meeting, Michael? Do you remember when that date was?
Are you talking about the letter the board or Brandy drafted on behalf of the board, or when we got the regulations?
Correct.
Yeah, maybe I could back up and just kind of talk about what it is that we're discussing here, which is it's zoning that was passed by the state like a year, maybe even a year and a half ago, which is requiring communities that have MBTA transit stations, bus service, subway service, and the abutting communities to those communities. It requires them to zone or have zoned in their community a certain amount of units for housing. It doesn't mean that it have to be built, but you have to have zoning in place for it. And so this had actually come up, I think, over the year, probably in a couple of different meetings. But the meeting where we first talked about it, that day I had just received from the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development a draft of the regulations, which were a lot more, I guess you could say, onerous than I had anticipated. I think any of us anticipated. And I'm not even sure if I brought that up. Steve, I think you might have raised the question. I know I was going to bring it up, but you might have beat me to it. But that's how that discussion emerged. And I think what the select board does, I don't think that precludes the planning board from being able to do anything. I certainly know it wasn't the intent of the board or myself to do that. But I think the points that were raised, some very general points, some issues that we had with the regulations, and those were sent off to DHCD. And again, I don't think it precludes anybody else from having those discussions or sending in their own comment.
Rob had his hand first up, Steve. Sorry, Rob.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I thought generally I support that letter. I think Catherine does raise a good point. When we see these kind of issues, it'd probably be a good idea to, make sure that other boards whose business it is, like the planning board, or whether it's Concom or sustainability, send it to them. If we have time, ask for input. Make sure they're aware of it. It never occurred to me to get advice from the planning board on this, but it probably should have, and that's something we should probably note for the future to try to be a little better about that in terms of communication. So thanks, Catherine, for bringing that up.
Yep.
Thank you. And my other comments have to do with the Valentine estate. So I guess it has to do with just, I think it's very difficult to get the public engaged and interested and learning what's going on and being educated if we don't give the tools. And the tools I think particularly is like, I don't understand why, like, say the RFP for the Valentine estate and the responses like aren't available. They may be on the website. I did try to look. And I would be saying, hey, look at here, right? We as taxpayers, like, supported that project proudly. We're paying extra taxes for it. So I think there's dwindling excitement when you see the condition and we cross our fingers nothing bad's going to happen. I know it's about cabling, and I think there's something being done. So my point isn't, I don't necessarily think anything's being done, but it's how that's communicated. And I did also along that lines, I know it was on the November 17th select board agenda about cabling. I did not attend or watch that meeting, but there were no minutes, right? And I guess that goes to my same thing, like, that's all 2 months now. And again, I know people are busy, but we have meetings, we have people taking notes, and I think that we should do better for the public. And the last thing on the Valentine is, I think it was early November when there was talk about the conservation. I don't think there was much mentioned about the historical restriction, but that is going to take effort. And if that just goes by the wayside, the whole thing has a chance to fail. So I think we need attention to that, and I would love to get some positive feedback that it's definitely going in that direction, not just, I know work that Brandy and Steve did, but I have not heard any updates, and I don't think there's people specifically engaged with that because they were kicking it back to the select board the last I knew. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Just a quick update with respect to that. On our agenda, under town manager's report, and prior to that, he also discussed different projects in town. And on that, on the agenda, and it's been on for quite some time, is the Valentine Project report. And Mike gives us an update on every meeting with respect to any action that's been done. And at our last meeting, Michael did discuss and provided us pictures of the cabling that was done to secure the structural aspect of that building so it doesn't collapse. So I don't know if you were aware of that or not, but it
no,
was discussed.
I think so Joe, what I'm saying is at least initially the public safety building, for example, was saying, hey, we're sending out our RFPs. I don't know if you sent a draft, but you told the construction companies you gave some details about pricing. And I think that's been absent from the public discussion about Valentine. And I think those things do get the public excited about stuff. Okay. And we shouldn't make it hard to get information.
Well, it's not that it's hard to get the information. Sometimes we're waiting to get the information back from those who we're seeking information from. Don't forget, we have to go out and do public bidding. We have to get 3 bids. Yeah. So that does take a while. I'm not making excuses. I'm just reminding people that things are a little bit different than the private sector. And I have no problem turning it over to Michael to bring this up because Michael is on top of that. And, maybe we're not doing enough information out there, but I think Michael has given us, reports bi-monthly during our meetings with respect to that. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, on one hand, I will have to agree with Kate. I think we can always do things better. And I think from a communication standpoint, there are other avenues that we could certainly utilize. I mean, I should probably be more active on social media and letting people know all of this stuff. I've just kind of taken a back seat on that, just because it can be such a dark hole to go into. But as Joe said, we try to provide updates at every meeting. Kate, when you were talking about the RFP, were you talking about the one for cabling, or were you referring to the one that we had issued earlier?
The one issued earlier is on the website because I talked to Jen about that. So the cabling, but I don't think that anyone purposely does secret squirrel, but the end result is when people can't get information of their tax dollars, it starts feeling like that. For one, I'm being honest. And then for two, I think we're missing opportunities to engage people. And unless you don't want to engage people, we have to do better. It's not just this, I've said this for a decade at a couple select board meetings a year. So I guess this is my 2022 starting to say that, but it's, if we care about civic engagement, we have to do better.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Catherine. Keep
Thank you.
reminding us.
All right.
Keep giving me a kick in the butt. And
All right.
I don't have a problem with that. My butt's big enough, so not a problem.
All right. Thanks,
Stephen,
Joe.
I see your hand wave.
All right, thank you, Joe. So Kate, just, you know, I agree with, I think, your comments about, you know, boards acting independently and not in concert. And you know that, you know, over the years, I've advocated for, you know, more not working in silos. And I think it's easy for that to happen, and it happens all the time. And this might be a good example of it, it may not. I just want to just clarify that we're at the very, very beginning stages of this MBTA communities process. This is they came out with a draft. They're taking opinions and comments for the next several months, and I happened to attend a webinar this past week on the MBTA communities program, and it's very much in flux. So I think there's, you know, definitely an opportunity and should be taken to connect with the planning board on this. No question about that. You had asked or made reference to the restrictions, the property restrictions for the Valentine, and as I believe you were on the last subcommittee meeting that Brandy and I had, and we talked about, we worked out a draft to send the town council. It came back this week. Honestly, I haven't had a chance to review it. I don't know if Brandy has. Our intent is to, now that we have the draft comments from town council, is to hold another meeting, and you know, hopefully we'll get good representation from the community and continue that process. So I just wanted to update that piece.
Thank you, Stephen, for the update. Mr. DeSoni, I see. Kate, is there any other comments or questions that you have at this time? Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
DeSoni, you have your hand raised. Go ahead,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, 49 Hawthorne Road, Ashland, Mass. Living on the edge, because I was just hearing this discussion. No problems. To whoever can answer, either chairman, town manager, whoever, is the MBTA issue, the Valentine issue, and housing issues, are they all on the town websites?
I don't think the MBTA one is yet, Mark.
But the Valentine's Days and the housing is?
So when you talk about housing, are you talking about the housing production plan?
I'm talking about what Catherine was talking about there.
That's the same. Oh, you're talking about inclusionary zoning?
Yeah.
I believe that's up there. The Valentine property definitely has a page.
Okay. Now, I have learned throughout the times to go to the town website. There's a list of emails that can be sent to the person. If they check them off and they get sent on the web listings. The what am I talking about? Departments, each departments, and they have the current projects, like the planning board, board of health, select board. What used to be the old oh, never mind. I can bring it up later. Is but as through emails, each department has their own send-outs. They can send out to a person through their email. They put you want to have a list. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it goes through each department, and I know what I'm talking about. I can't find the name, but I get my issue. I get my news from each of the departments, and I can open up their departments, and there's the agendas, minutes, and bulletins on each department. So throughout all those departments that I open up, it's right there of updates of what there is to see. The Valentine States has got update and photos and agenda, past agendas, and year on, you know, next month, or it's going to be the next meeting and stuff like that. If you look, if it's not updated from there, then like Kathy's saying, people won't know what is there or isn't. But if they can look at the town websites and go through departments and do the web listings that's there, it's easier to communicate and read for yourself and then decipher what you read. And then come to the meeting with the questions or prepared. That way you be an informed citizen, voter, and not thinking that something wasn't said, but was said on the website. That's where I'm going to now. Mr. Town Manager Michael's got his hand up right now.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to one thing that Mark said, which, you know, I agree with a lot of the things that he said. But another thing that people can do, if they have questions about a project or something like that, is they can email us directly, either elected officials or appointed officials, and we can give them the information that we have. The website should be a good repository for information. It should be dynamic. It should be updated on an ongoing basis. So that should be a place. But again, don't dismiss, you know, your ability to reach out to your elected, appointed officials and get the answers that you need. And God forbid, don't go on Facebook and look for your answers, because that's just a cesspool of misinformation. But, you know, again, I just want to reiterate that that's an option.
With that in mind is, I email straight to the town manager, to the boards, and I get answers back. And I know those answers are from the person, because they type it in. It's not robots. It's a person that's there doing it. And they give me the answers from there, and then I just go back and forth, like I was doing with the zoning codes in the downtown districts and all that stuff. I was with the planning board working. And all be one-to-one. Communication is a wonderful art. It should be a masterpiece by now, but with Zoom, this is the portraits that we have to paint on, and this is where we are. We are not Washington and the Congress with a voting bill, so we are transparent. This town is transparent, and don't be afraid to go back and forth and get information. They will talk to you. We are not European borderline, Ukraine, Russia, or whatever. We are a small town. We shall overcome this communication effort. And if you aren't bad enough, email the departments themselves and then wait for them to respond.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate that. Appreciate your comments. We are running a tad behind schedule. And so I will ask if there are any other individuals with respect to citizens' participation. If you have any additional comments or questions, raise your hands. If not, I am going to welcome Jen Paratori and the Historical Commission update coming up. And Jen, good evening and welcome to the other members of the Historical Committee. Nice to have you all present this evening.
Hi, everyone. Liz Childress is our vice chairwoman. She's here tonight, so she's going to be providing the select board with a summary of what we've been working on for the past year and where we plan to take the Historical Commission in the years to come. So, hi, Liz.
Hi, Jen. Nice to see everybody. So we've been busy. You know, it's a new commission. You know, we've met in person, we've met over Zoom, and so we have, you know, a couple of things that we've been working really hard with. First of all, this summer, thanks to the Ashland Farmers Market, we were able to have a presentation there. It was one Saturday in August. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but thanks to my colleagues, you know, it was a pretty successful day. Kelly Flannery and I had a wonderful time creating a visual. I don't know if any of the select board members were there that Saturday. We put together a presentation of all the historical landmarks in town and a little, you know, description of each place. We had Jim Nielsen had created a questionnaire. We had taken, you know, folks' emails and phone numbers. And Jim, you know, we've been in the process of getting in touch with those people, you know, concerning, you know, their kind of vision for, you know, a historical Ashland. So that was one of the first major things that we did. I'm just gonna, you know, give you a little overview. We reviewed 2 demolition permits, one on Chestnut Street, one on Fountain Street. That obviously that one on Fountain Street is ongoing. We, of course, had some participation in the Mendez building project. Nothing that we were able to accomplish in terms of certain things relating to that project, meaning the gravesite. We continue discussions with the commission about concerning what is happening with the mill buildings. I know Michael was at one of our meetings, you know, where we had discussed which particular buildings were slated to be, you know, renovated in some way. Let's see. One major thing that actually Jen Paratori had the main role in is we applied for 2 grants over the last couple of months. One was the Veterans Heritage Grant, and then a Mass Historical Commission General Grant. And Jen, if I'm not mistaken, our letter of intent, Jen, for one of them was not accepted, correct?
Correct. There were too many applicants for that one particular grant. So we're still pursuing other grant opportunities because I think this is going to roll into our request for funding for certain projects that we have coming up that we wanted to discuss with the select board and put before the town, right. Including the establishment of a local historic district. So that's why we're starting to try to find some grant money so that it doesn't take away from town budget, but we do understand that there is some money allocated for historical purposes. And that's just...
Yeah, and one of our major projects right now, thanks to Jim Nielsen, actually, is creating a historic district in downtown Ashland. Jim had been in touch with a woman out of Holliston, and he's been working very closely with her about the process of creating, you know, a historic district downtown. So that's one of our major goals moving forward. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. So the mill buildings and you know, the preservation of other historic landmarks in town and creating that historic district in downtown.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Jen.
Does anybody have any questions or?
Yeah, I was just going to open it up to the board. Any questions or comments for Liz and, okay, ladies first. Brandy, you had your hand raised just about as quickly as Rob, so ladies first, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much for the update. The idea of a historic district really intrigues me. Can you give like a quick overview of what that would include?
Yeah, so hold on, let me, so there's a local historic consultant, and Jen, it's Holliston, right? Her name is Stacy Spies.
She helped out with Hopkinton. Hopkinton recently established a local historic district. And I think it was a surprise to me because I see the signs in Ashland that say, "Welcome to historic downtown Ashland." And I just assumed that it's a historic district. And it wasn't until I joined the historical commission that I realized that they're just pretty signs. They have no meaning. There's actually no local historic district. And we have such a rich history here in Ashland that in a contiguous kind of neighborhood downtown where all of these old buildings should be part of a historic district so that they can be protected. And you know, the discussion of the mill buildings was definitely what kind of got us thinking on this track, because there's not a lot that we can do right now to prevent any building from being knocked down. But if there is a historic district, it will help put a little bit of protection, a little bit more protection than we have now on these historic buildings, and give us a little bit more ability to preserve the history of Ashland. So that's why we wanted to start pursuing the local historic district. And it's definitely a process. It's a long process that's going to include establishing a subcommittee and a town warrant, and it's going to be a while before this is a reality. But nobody, you know, somebody has to get the wheels in motion for this, and that's why we're trying to get so much feedback from residents too. We're trying to engage residents in what we're trying to accomplish as a commission, which is why we did the farmers market. And we're trying to encourage people to attend our meetings. Kelly's been posting our agendas on Facebook just to try to get people to come and give us ideas. But so the first step, I think, is we had a 2010 historical property survey done. And what we learned from that, because we weren't a commission, none of us were on the commission at that point, but it had run out of funding. So not every historical property was added to it. And our first step is to finish that survey. So we're trying to get a rough estimate of how much that would cost us to finish the survey, add additional properties on, and actually define what would be a potential historic district in terms of streets and landmarks downtown. So it's very important to finish that survey to make sure that all the historical buildings are being included.
Yeah, and that survey, in case, you know, any of you would like to look, it's actually on the Ashland, Mass website, our website, and it's in the Historical Commission's documents on our specific page.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks, Jen. Rob, you had your hand raised, and then Yolanda.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I'm looking forward actually at Yolanda's comments, because we were on that committee that met with Rich Gold, and I would say, so first of all, I really am happy that you people are going. I did see your presentation at the farmers market last summer. It was great. I think we're all really happy that you people have come forward and are being very active, because I think we do need guardians of our history. And I think this historic district, great idea, and seems long overdue. I would just say, in terms of the mill building, I would think time is of the essence, and I would suggest you start. We had a number of presentations from the developer, and I don't know if you saw any of those or familiar, but there was a lot of discussion about saving at least some of the granite buildings. So, you know, I think you should be aware that that happened. And also the process has now changed. It's he's pursuing it with the planning board under the current zoning. So that process, my understanding, is moving ahead. So the planning board is also going to be very key in that process. But I would suggest, and I don't know, maybe I'll volunteer Michael here, that you contact the developer directly and speak to him about your concerns about preserving some of the historical aspect of the buildings. He's doing design right now, my understanding. So that would be my advice on that, and maybe a little volunteering of Michael to help kind of with that relationship.
Yeah, Rob, Michael did attend one of our meetings, and he spoke to us about the plans for, you know, that strip of buildings.
Would it, Michael, Yolanda had her hand raised next, but I just, to piggyback what Rob just mentioned, maybe be advisable to have the developer meet with the historical commission and do his presentation. If they have questions and stuff, to ask point blank direct questions to him, you know, during that meeting. That may be one way to you know, speak directly to the individual and not, you know, go through individuals, because sometimes things are lost in translation. So yeah,
maybe I'll say something after Yolanda.
Yep, Yolanda, you're up next. I'm sorry about that. Go ahead.
Not a problem if Michael had a good answer. You know, it's hard when we're trying to wait by turn, because sometimes it makes sense for someone else to jump in. Anyway, first of all, thank you, Liz and Jenny and whoever else is here from the Historical Commission. I know you guys have been working hard this last year, and I'm glad we were able to get the commission back and working. In regards to the idea of a historic district, I agree, Jenny. You see those signs and you think we must have something real, but as you said, they are just pretty signs that someone decided to put up. So I like that you're looking to work on that historic district. I know it's been talked about on and off by many different people over many years. In regards to the mill buildings, I don't know if you need to have a separate meeting. I would just say, if when the developer reaches out and does a presentation, an official presentation at the planning board, you know, maybe you can sit in on that and reach out to the chair of the planning board through Michael and say, you know, we as the historic commission want to be there and have a voice if possible, just during the presentation, and give your feedback. I don't know, you know, if, like we said, he is planning on maintaining at least 2 of the granite buildings. And he is looking to work with the town. The other change, I know last year at this time, we thought he was going to be looking for new zoning and things like that, and that has changed. He's working within the current zoning. So I think just if you can pay attention to when he goes in front of the planning board, that would be helpful as well. At one point before, we thought he was going to be doing it under the current zoning. We were planning on having a joint meeting with the various committees that could be affected by it, but because he's going to just work within the zoning, that meeting didn't seem to be necessary. So, but I would say pay attention to when he's going before the planning board. I'm sure Michael can get you a potentially copies of the current plans that they're looking at. They were available. They should be available after the meeting that we had with them probably a month to 6 weeks ago, to see where there's at. So, but thank you for the presentation. And yeah, I would say if you want to have funding for more of the, you know, historic properties, look to get something written up. There should be, you know, we have historic CPC funds that you should be able to tap into. We have a good amount of historic that we should be able to, you know, you'll need to work with the CPC committee So reach out, I would start reaching out to them already and say, look, we're looking at creating this. We don't know the funds yet. We don't know exactly what we need, but certainly reach out to them already so that it's not last minute before we're trying to get warrants for town meeting. And again, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your work. And that's it.
Thank you, Yolanda. Michael?
Thank you, Yolanda.
No, well, first, I just want to echo everybody's sentiments. I think the work that you're doing is great, and I can tell you're definitely passionate. All of you are definitely passionate about this. I like the idea of a local historic district. I think it's really the smart move to finish the inventory first and know exactly what you're working with, and then you can start creating and carving boundary lines and start going through that process. I think you're approaching it the right way. With the mill buildings, you know, I almost have to apologize to you because I feel like so much bad information has been put out there with regards to this. And what happens is it causes everybody to get upset and in a frenzy about something that's not happening. I think, you know, for a long time, the narrative has been out there that town government wants to tear down these granite mills, and it's actually been anything but. It's actually the one thing that town government has actually all agreed on is the importance of maintaining those mills, and the granite ones at least. And like Yolanda and Rob said, the new plans, or at least the latest ones that the developer had presented to the working group, the two original buildings he was going to maintain and refurbish and redo those. The third granite building is actually not an original building except in the very back. I don't think he had plans to save that, but as Yolanda had mentioned, he made the decision, instead of going for a zoning change which would allow more height, he is working within the zoning, which means he has to keep it down and follow other setbacks that are in the current zoning. So he wouldn't need a special permit or a zoning change. It's up to him when he decides to put in that application. I do not know when. I can certainly check in with him and see when he anticipates filing that. But again, as other people had mentioned, that goes through a whole public hearing process where everybody, including the Historical Commission, has a chance to weigh in on the plan itself and what they think are important and the values that should be really embodied in that design moving forward.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, so Joe, I just want to finish up by saying, we appreciate the commission, really, all of us appreciate all the support that we've received over the year. The last couple of months have been a little sketchy, but we've muddled through, some, touchy issues. And, Tommy, he would have loved to have been here. He's working, he's also, he just texted me. He's very appreciative of everybody's support, and he really feels good about the group that we are, working together. So.
Well, we appreciate that as well. You all seem to have a natural desire to stay involved, actively involved in our community and our town, especially with the historical aspect of it. So we all appreciate all the work that you're doing. Continue doing it. There are going to be times when you're going to be questioning yourselves because, is it worth the aggravation? The bottom line is, yes, it is. Yes, it is. There's a lot of good that comes from what you folks are doing. And unfortunately, there's some issues that come up that, they're difficult, like you said, Liz and Jen, and you've experienced it the last couple of months. But don't lose sight that of the big picture. And the big picture is working for the community and doing what is right for the community. That's very important. And to continue doing what you're doing, fight the good fight. I guess that's what I can say. And we appreciate all your efforts. And if you need any help, we'd be more than happy. As individuals who've been here long enough to know that been battle scars, they'll last forever. But, just do what you got to do and keep plugging in. We appreciate all that you've done and continue to do for us. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
folks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know we ran a little over. I think it was worth it with respect to some of the questions that we had in citizens' participation and with respect to the Historical Commission update. This is the first time they came in front of us for an update, and we greatly appreciate it. So giving them the extra time I thought was well worth it. Next on our agenda, and we're just 5 minutes behind, which isn't too bad, is the Racial Equity Steering Group. And Makita, Michael, and Jen, I believe, are going to be the spokespeople for this long and extensive survey and report that was done. And I don't want to take any steam away from Michael, because I think he was going to address something prior to the conversation. There was something that was said on a social media page that it was like stymied this group, and that's not what was asked. What was asked was to expand the report, to make it larger, to make it more inclusive, and not to realign their study. So, Michael, I'll hand it over to you with respect to that.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I can just lead into just kind of the process here, how this all originated, and then I can address that concern during that. It's probably better if I can do it in chronological order. But yes, so we're here to present the report of the Racial Equity Study Group. We have several of the members here in attendance. So in addition to Jen and myself, we do have Nikita Keegan, who is here. KG Narayana is here. Another member who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, but who is very important and has provided a lot of good wisdom throughout this process is Rabbi Eric Gerbis from our local temple. So just to give you an idea of when this started, shortly after the George Floyd incident in 2020, in the spring, summer of 2020, Makita had reached out to me and with a sense of urgency, which I hadn't heard before in a lot of people, and I was trying to reconcile a lot of stuff myself, just with thoughts and ideas about race and inclusion and diversity within the country and within the state. And one of the things that we decided we should take some type of action. And the first part of that was forming this group. It's a fairly informal group, and then we wanted to move forward to action steps. But then we took a step back and we said, okay, the first thing we need to do as part of this is we need to do an assessment. And so I just want to reinforce that the study that you see is not the final step by any means. It's actually just the first step in what we believe is going to be a long but hopefully transformative process. And so this is the report that's in front of you today. Again, this is the final draft. Joe, as you mentioned, there was previously a draft that had been issued. We had sent it back to Suffolk, not because we wanted to have things changed. And the implication that staff would purposely try to edit something because it didn't like, or we didn't like what it said, is ludicrous. And just, I can't believe it's accepted in this town, like notions such as that. I think we all need to look at ourselves in the mirror if that's the type of attitude that we're accepting here. But anyway, it was only sent back because we wanted Suffolk to expand and do better data analysis on what it had collected. And so that's the only reason why we had sent that back. Just to give you some brief, I'm not going to go through all 201 pages. It's so everybody can take a deep breath there. But I think it's important to note that a lot of those pages. Is the actual data and backup. So even if there was concerned that we had manipulated that. You could just look at the raw data and see, see where things are. I will point out, because this was a question asked to me by a couple of select board members before. The question is with this number, this participation number, this N figure, is it scientific enough to actually extrapolate these answers and these opinions to the broad community? And it's not at that scientific level yet, but I think there's two really important things to note here. First is that Suffolk thought that it was consistent with the participation rates with other studies that they had been doing in the middle of the pandemic. And the second thing, and the point I really want to reiterate, is that just because we can't extrapolate it scientifically to the rest of the community doesn't negate the information that we received and the feelings and perceptions that were communicated through this study. So I just want to make that point really, really clear. I think, overall the project, we really, the intention was to document the experiences and the views of community members from diverse backgrounds, get a sense of where they were, what they had experienced, and then create a space where people could have conversations about that. And Makita, if you want to jump in, or Jen, if you want to jump in at any point, please take over. So, we got a lot of good feedback on the things that the town was doing right, not necessarily, or not specifically with regards to racial equity and diversity and inclusion, but other things such as the farmers market, the corner spot, some of the open space that we have. So that was really, really an important point that we wanted to have. But there were some areas of concern that really stood out. One is there was some concern about the school system and some of the experiences that people had with the schools. And I know the schools are embarking upon their own journey to do this, but I think it's important as we move forward that we coordinate those efforts and make sure that we're not necessarily hampering each other. Another major area of concern was the lack of diversity in town gatherings, meetings, and town government in general. Like the diversity wasn't reflected in our public-facing actors, if you will. And another area of concern was accessibility and development, or people feeling like we were accessible to them. We didn't necessarily do the best there as well. Take a pause here. Does anybody have any questions?
Go ahead, Yolanda.
Michael, has this report in the form that we have it now been shared with the schools?
Yes, earlier today. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, I think one consistent theme again was on the diversity of the public-facing community actors. Was the term used? There's some community members that perceive that town representatives do not necessarily reflect the diversity of our actual population, which I think we can all agree with. Communication was another thing that was brought up as potentially an issue. On one hand, people who knew about the opportunities to be informed about town government happenings and things going on thought very highly of those efforts. But there was a good number of people who didn't know that those initiatives actually existed. So they were left in the dark. And I think, one of the recommendations really was to focus on broadening that horizon. But the main recommendation from Suffolk with regards to this was the value of creating areas and spaces where people could have conversations about race equity, and diversity and inclusion.
Go ahead, Rob.
Well, thanks. I don't, Makita or anybody else from the committee, do you guys want to talk about the report at all before we go to questions, or I didn't want to. She's happy. Okay.
Well, I think we want to hear some of the questions.
Sure.
I just also, like, if Michael, you have anything else to add, and I know KG's here as well. But there are a couple other hands up, so maybe there's an opportunity to talk a little bit more with some of the questions that folks have as well.
Sure, I'll
before we.
Well, I could also finish up too, if that will help.
That's an option.
Just guys, I think that would be helpful. I think that might answer some questions before they even get asked, and would allow us to have a more robust conversation about it. I'll just move right on to recommendations from Suffolk. So first was in the area of economic development. I think there is a concern out there that we are, although Beth does an excellent job, we need to do a better job collectively of targeting and ensuring that we help women and minority-owned businesses here in town, help them succeed. So a good example is we have some great grant programs locally and actually through the state that we offer businesses. However, not everybody knows about them, particularly women and minority-owned businesses. And so even when they do find out about them, sometimes they need help navigating those. And so we need to do a better job of collectively of providing that type of resource for those businesses. And to that end, we have talked with Beth, and Beth will probably be doing, we'll be doing a couple of forums, or a couple of, I don't know if forums is the right format, but opportunities for education and training specifically devoted to women and minority-owned businesses. Another suggestion was the adoption of a diversity and inclusion plan. And that really relates to a comprehensive approach to recruitment, hiring, training, and professional development. And then also another recommendation was the use of our technology, or broaden our use of technology. There's quite a big section in the report about ethnography. I think, is that the best? I don't know. It was a term I had not heard of before, but basically it was an analysis of our social media presence and some of the conversations around that. And so Suffolk felt like there were opportunities that we could improve upon there. And then finally, a recommendation was, how can we continue to facilitate these types of conversations? And I think all of these were taken to heart. Again, this report is only the first step. It's not the final step, even though it's a final report. And the next phase would be moving into implementation. So Makita and Jen, did I add anything on that?
Did you have something? I didn't want to step.
No, go ahead, Jen. I'll jump in. But so far, I'm hearing things
so
pretty
just one of the
accurate.
things that I wanted to just add, part of the reason why this process took such a long time is that we sort of, as a group, painstakingly went through and sort of thought about the kind of questions we wanted to ask. And we were really hopeful for a lot of qualitative, meaning sort of maybe interviews and focus group data, because we had just sort of had the National Citizen Survey, so we had a little bit of a baseline. They didn't have a ton of questions around sort of race and equity and diversity in a community, but there were a few that we could sort of parse out that led us down a path that thought we need to have more qualitative information. And so we worked really hard for several months to try to create a mechanism to have focus groups. It was, exceptionally difficult, I think, with the pandemic. We offered many options, both in person and virtually. Again, it was during the summertime. And so we had to reassess as a group and decided, maybe we can get more voices if we also take those questions and put them into a survey, so that we could increase that number, knowing it wasn't going to be perfect. And obviously you can't have a follow-on conversation from a survey, but that was sort of, something that we evolved to make sure that we tried to include as many people as possible. And so that sort of made the process a bit longer than we had initially anticipated, but I think it was beneficial to have more voices, and it gives us a little bit more data to work from as we work towards an implementation plan.
Yeah, Jen, I want to second that. I think methodologically speaking, I think that was very challenging, right? Because we did want to get to that qualitative information, that qualitative data, and the focus group piece. We were initially thinking we'd be able to get more people than we could, but when we're doing this in the middle of a plague, a literal plague, there were some very tough logistical challenges. So when we had to pivot and be a little agile and go the survey route so we could increase participation as much as possible. I do want to say this though very quickly. First off, for the participants in the steering committee and just to the town in general, to the select board and to Michael and Jan, I think this is a great starting point. The willingness to be able to even start to collect this information is a critical piece for our community so that we can better understand. We may not have all the answers right now, but we have an idea of what our citizenry is thinking, and how we can better come together to work with each other to make sure that Ashland, can continue to be an open and welcoming community to everyone. But I don't want to ramble too much. But I'd like to see hear some of the questions and answer some of them if need be before we go forward.
Thank you, Makita. Brandy, you had your hand raised.
Thanks so much. So first of all, thank you to the steering committee and all the participants that volunteered their time to be a part of this. The data, I actually spent a good portion of my Sunday going through this report, and I found especially the qualitative data really compelling. Some of the things that I pulled out specifically were about BIPOC businesses and how we can help support them. There were a lot of comments about affordable housing, which I think we are working to help address. And there was also comments about not only representation on boards and committees, but also specifically like employees in town hall and our police and fire. So I think that those comments are really valuable. We're in the process of starting a police chief search. So I think that those comments will help us reach a broader, hopeful audience for candidates for police chief. I did have a couple questions about the social media and the website information and stuff like that. It seemed kind of an interesting way. What was sort of cherry picked as far as data points. I was curious, when they were talking about our town website, it would be interesting to see, what people are using from our town website and how those kind of statistics, and then also, Facebook pages. The town's Facebook page wasn't listed at all, and so I was just curious, how involved the committee was in that. And then I have one other comment after that too. So, sorry, I'm a little all over the place. But I guess my other comment is the idea of what our next step is with this and how we kind of start putting together a plan. I think the recommendation that Suffolk had, that we kind of need more of a strategic plan. I wanted to recommend that, potentially, because I start thinking about specific things that we can do to improve, and I think we got to take a kind of a broader approach before we start talking about specific tactics. But I wanted to, throw out there that the Wayside Equity Center in Framingham might be a really good resource for us to utilize, because they have been working with organizations and communities trying to begin their diversity and equity planning and training. So they may be a really good resource for us as we begin to kind of take the next step with this. So I wanted to just throw that out there as well. So, but thank you very much for pulling all this together. The data was great. So thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Anybody want to comment respond to, hold on a second, Rob,
Okay.
towards
Oh, right.
Brandy's comments, to anybody from REI.
Well, I think, Brandy, you'd asked a question about data, and I would actually turn it over to Makita and Jen. They did a lot of the data work associated with this and a lot of the guidance to Suffolk. We're really blessed to have them both working on this and actually in town and helping out with a lot of different things. So.
Well, Jen, I mean, we could address this, but insofar, I think Brandy had a specific question about the social media piece. That was independently performed by Suffolk without any input from the committee. So, and you know, quite frankly, Brandy, part of the reason why we wanted Suffolk to come in, or an academic and independent entity, was specifically for that independence, right? You know, we could definitely share certain things, you know, a certain place to go to look, A, B, C, D, but, you know, we wanted, one of the concerns of the committee was to make sure that we had that external resource to be able to fairly evaluate or take an outside look in, so that we wouldn't be casting any kinds of our kind of opinions or experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, to your point, it looks like they may not have caught a lot of the resources that they could have, but like I said, like we've all been saying, this is the beginning, not the end. So I am hopeful that in the future we'll be able to gather more information about what happens on the town's in real life and online presence in these matters. Jen, I don't know if you have anything else to add about that.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think, you know, I agree that we didn't get any input on that social media analysis. And I think part of it is on this, you know, the way that this was set up, it was self-selected. So obviously we put out calling and people selected, opted in, as opposed to, you know, sort of a randomized sample. And by looking at what people are saying sort of online, you're also able to sort of gauge what maybe people who didn't self-select in. And so I think they were trying to just do a sort of a quick overview, but they did not ask necessarily for us to list out some of the presence that we'd want them to analyze. It was sort of something that they were doing while they were doing the other data analysis.
Thank you, Jen. Stephen, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to the racial equity group. Like Brandy, I went through the report, and despite my feelings about the sample size, and I think Michael answered this earlier, the narratives, the commentaries were the most valuable part of this for me as well. And you know, just reading those and being able to see through somebody else's eyes their experience. So you know, hopefully as we move forward with this, we're going to be able to, you know, face to face have these types of conversations. And so couple comments and then a question. Number one, the report mentions the strategic plan, and I think they indicate they weren't speaking directly to our strategic plan. I think they indicated they had no idea whether we had one or not. We are in the process of working on one, and I think, and being a member of that group, I think this is such valuable information to become part of, or more of a major part of our strategic plan as it gets completed. So I would hope Michael would agree with that part of it. So the other comment, it's a comment / question, is the other groups in town. How do you anticipate coordinating with the various other groups that have an associated mission, whether it's Ashland is United area, the racial equity group? There may be others, I don't know. But so how does this group look to coordinate with the other entities out there? And then lastly, I would encourage the group to pick some dates to be at the farmers market. You know, you get a lot of bang for your buck. You get FaceTime with people. I think The Historical Commission indicated that earlier. I think it's a good way to communicate. So just put that on your list, possible to-do list. So I guess I'll wait for your answer about the coordination piece.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab at it. Steve, I think the steering group that you see, the natural evolution of it is to move more towards a more formalized committee that would be charged with taking this information, finding out more information, but more importantly, putting together that diversity and inclusion plan that was recommended and taking the steps necessary to enact that plan and also have some level of accountability. I could see that membership also being, we could have members from other affiliate groups as part of that. At the same time, I don't think a formal committee replaces the work that they're doing. I think there is a noble and necessary and important component that I'll just say grassroots, I'll use that term, grassroots activism plays. So that would be that's my thoughts moving forward. And Makita and Jen, if you wanted to, or KG, if you wanted to add to it.
Including them would definitely help. Also, this committee itself can help implement some of the recommendations if it's much easier to do it through the town rather than outside.
I think that, just heralding back to what I think we talked about when we embarked upon this, this is the beginning, and this is actually what Brandy mentioned about strategic direction. It's going to take, a group of citizens, but it's also going to take us interfacing with the town as well to come up with this plan. I think that, obviously, the groups in Ashland have been monumental in the past couple of years that have really taken action on this issue and have pushed, Ashland's United and area has been incredibly important to making advances in a very short time around opening up those communication channels, and I think that's amazing. Just amazing that the work that they've been doing, and I don't want to leave out any groups that I haven't mentioned, but so many folks. But yes, I think that there's value in making sure that we expand this a bit and make sure that we are focused on putting together a strategic plan so that we can identify our next steps and execute on them. I think this town has a very unique opportunity to be leaders and innovators in this space as well. I will say this. There are a lot of towns in Massachusetts of our size that, haven't even got to the point that we have insofar as trying to get more information about these issues and opening up dialogues about these issues. But now that we are poised to take action, I think there's a real opportunity for Ashland to be a leader in this space. And I think there's a great opportunity to make sure that different facets of the town and the citizenry are involved in that.
I just want to add the fact that inclusive is part of our team's name, so it doesn't include everybody. That's what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, KG.
Yeah.
Yolanda. You're muted.
I'm going to let Rob go because he had his hand up first.
Ladies first.
You can go, Yolanda. That's great.
Okay. I too, read this very well detailed report. I think they did a great job. I had the opportunity to sit in on one of the sessions. Brenda was very good, as was Sonia, and then I ran into them at the farmers market a couple months later, and they were just excited. I think they themselves were a bit disappointed that they didn't get a larger response to people wanting to come and talk to them directly and even get a larger survey response. I think they thought that we had done some good things trying to get the information out. And even though, this is it seems to be a somewhat good sample of our community, I think they themselves were disappointed that they couldn't get more data for us. I think they did some good work here. And I mean, everything that has been said, I guess for me, my big question is, we have this report. What is our next steps? What is our next step going to be? How are we going to take this information that we have, and as other people have said, implement it and use it to improve those things that they noted in the report that need improvement? So, and that's really my big thing. And I know it's going to take a plan and input from a lot of people, but it's one of those things that I'm hoping that those of you that are on this, on our committee for DE and I, will keep it in the forefront, because as we all know, sometimes depending on who's sitting where, sometimes these things, projects, whatever they are, get put on a back burner because someone doesn't think they're important anymore. And I think this is one of those projects that now that it's in everyone's minds, we need to keep it there, and we need to take this project to completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda, and I thoroughly agree with your comments, with everybody so far. Hey, Rob, you're up.
Yeah, just some comments and a question. Thank you for your efforts. A very interesting report to read. I especially like the comments, and I know we talked about the difficulty of getting people involved, but it was good. You got some good involvement and some good comments. Yeah, I just want to emphasize some of them were, for example, concern about business space for people, and one thing we want to keep in mind, the mill building is one of those low-cost small business areas that would be important to BIPOC people, and that's maybe redevelop the residential space. So it's something we should keep in mind, having some kind of area like that. And I also appreciate some of the comments about open space and quality of life, and having affordable housing, but also having things like being able to walk places and things like that. So I think that all kind of comes together, and good to incorporate this into a strategic plan and also our comprehensive plan. Hopefully we'll be starting up soon. And then my question at the end, and I'm glad Michael referred to this, that when they did the survey, a lot of the comments were about issues with the schools, which of course I think in most communities like ours, where schools are a very large part of the community, that this is where a lot of issues do arise. And so I was a little surprised that the survey wasn't more involved with the schools, but I guess my question, and they did talk about that, which is good. So I guess my question moving forward, what are the schools doing? And do you have kind of a plan or a goal to work more closely with them or integrate what they seem to be doing with, what we really started here in the general government portion of town? I guess that would be my thought on that, or my indication that I think that strikes me as a very important part of this.
Yeah. Let me take a shot at those, Joe.
Sure.
Or first shot at them. So I think anytime you're talking about strategic plans and you start talking about goals, it's helpful to start thinking about them in terms of short-term goals, intermediate, and long-term goals. I think and you can do a number of things concurrently, I should also point out. So I think one of the things, like I said before, we talked about some of the impediments for BIPOC businesses getting started here and getting the resources that they need to be successful. So one of our short-term goals is we're going to do a couple of outreach sessions just to start. I mean, that doesn't mean that it ends with that, to highlight some of the opportunities that we have and some of the help that we can provide, and then also shepherd people through that process. The other thing that I think would be very, very important is, after we take these comments from you, for the committee to go back and come together and put together a more structured plan as to how we're going to move forward with those short-term goals and those intermediate-term goals and those long-term goals. And I think you'll see that the schools will be part of that, and I know that they're willing to be a part of that. I think we're just looking at maybe formalizing that, because there's got to be some accountability associated with this as well. Yolanda said it best. These reports, plans, they have a magic ability sometimes to just be put on a shelf and not acted upon and looked at. You know, the final product is a nice, pretty shiny report with glossy photos. That's not what we're aiming for here. This plan should be dynamic. It should be evolving. It should have regular check-in points. Say, okay, how are we doing on this? And it should have associated metrics with it to move forward. So that's what I think, at least in the very short term, what our goal should be. And Makita,
And yeah, I'm sorry. Did I
Go
jump
ahead,
in front of you, Brandy? Thank you. Yeah, and Michael, I'm glad that you said that, because that's actually something that, as you very well know, and Jen very well knows, these are the things that the committee has had in mind from the beginning. You know, the accountability, the results-driven piece. You know, when I came before this body, you know, when we first got started, I said most towns and committees, they do these reports, and then these reports disappear and nothing happens. So I am encouraged by a lot of the questions and a lot of the statements that I've heard on Select Board tonight about that results-driven processing, that the strategic piece and the accountability piece, and that is what we're driving for. And we want to try to move as quickly as we reasonably can with short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. So I just wanted to say that was a major focus of the committee, and I'm glad that you did articulate that, Michael.
Thank you, Makita. Brandy, you have a couple of questions or comments.
Yeah, so just something that triggered for me when you guys were talking about the schools. One of the things that the schools have done pretty successfully very recently is on their communication side. They've done a lot with being able to translate emails into different languages. They have their website that can be, Google Translate can translate it into a number of different languages. So if we're thinking about short-term, medium-term, time frames, something like translation into different languages with our communications might be something that you'd want to put on that list. And the one other question I had was, is this report going to be up on our website? Are we going to have this up for people to be able to take a look at?
yes.
Great. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, a couple of comments as well. I too, on last Sunday, read over that report, not once, but several times. And one of the things that caught my eye, I was reflecting back on the fact that there was a comment made about the fact that we don't support in our local government during meetings or other closed caption meetings, headsets or even sign language for the deaf during our meetings, especially when it comes to town meetings or special town meetings. And I sat back for a second and I was thinking to myself, you know what? We don't. I don't remember ever seeing an individual standing off to the side doing sign language in any meetings, in any of our meetings. And that just, wow. It's something that can easily be resolved, and we didn't do it.
We've done it in the past, not recently,
in the past,
but
but
we've
we
had
haven't done it
somebody,
recently.
we've had two people who have done sign language for town meeting,
How long ago?
at least 5-6 years ago.
Oh, okay, that's quite a amount of time that's gone between that and now, especially when we're trying to be diverse and show that we're up and coming within the things that we need to do. So that was just one thing. The report I thought was very, very good. I mean, for the life of me, I mean, we have over 17,000 people in the community and a little over 9,000 registered voters. And yet, during our regular meetings and stuff, we have maybe 150, 200 tops at best on a given good night. So looking at the numbers that did this survey, it's an average. It's an average. Would I have loved to see more people participate in it? Absolutely. But it does give us some idea as to what we need to do, what we need to work on, where we need to go with it. And I think you all hit the same question that we're all interested in, is where do we go next? I agree. A lot of reports, Makita, especially when it comes to comprehensive planning reports, housing planning reports, they go on the shelf and they become dust collectors, and they're never opened up, they're never used. This is a report that shouldn't fall in that category in any way, shape, or form, and it should be used on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, to make sure we're doing what we need to do as a catch-all, to make sure we're heading in the right direction, and we just don't sit back on our laurels and say, okay, yeah, well, we've done this, and then forget about it. Can't do that. You can't do that. Being one of the oldest folks on the board here, I have to tell you, I mean, times change, and with times changing, you need to stay up on a lot of different things, or else you fall and become stagnant. And that's one thing I don't want this town to do, is become stagnant. We have too many good people within our town government that won't let that happen. We have too many good people that are elected on boards that won't let that happen. But we need to just keep reminding ourselves, keep pinching ourselves, saying, hey, wake up, you got to continue doing what you're doing. And I just hope that we have a plan for the future, in the immediate future, as to, what we're going to do with this information. And do we have plans looking maybe within 3 to 5 years from now? Do we do another survey to compare what we have now to 3 to 5 years in the past? And I haven't heard that discussion at all. And I hope that does become part of the discussion, so that we can use this as a basis and see an improvement or lack of improvement, and what actions need to be taken. So those are my comments, and I don't have a question, but those are my comments. So thank you all for who worked on this study, and it was I thought it was well received. And if we need to work together with the schools to get some of these questions and some of the ideologies that have come about, I know they just got this recently, so they haven't had an opportunity to really digest the whole gambit of that report. I'm sure they're probably a little surprised, as I was when I read the report, and hopefully they can make the corrections to make those issues go away at some point. So with that, thank you.
Joe?
Yes, KG.
Yeah, thank you for the encouraging words and the support that you have. That really helps us to move forward. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you all. Michael, any closing statements? Or Makita, or Jen, with respect to this study? Again, I thought it was very, very nicely done. And Suffolk, thank you for getting your time and effort into this. I think they were a very good part of getting everything done. And hopefully our next survey will be a lot better. Will be a lot better. It was an eye-opener. It was an awakening. And let's move to make it better, make Ashland better in the forefront. Like you said, Makita, we take the leadership role in this. We need to continue. We just can't drag our feet on this. And I don't think anybody would disagree.
Thank you, Joe. And the only thing I have to say is, let's get to work, Ashland.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Makita. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thanks.
Well, moving onward and upward. We have old new business. Discuss the 2022 volunteer breakfast. Any ideas, Susan, as to what we're looking to do? Or are we going to hold off a little bit until this COVID crisis seems to slow down and calm down a little bit? Or is it something we want to do late spring?
So Joe, basically I put it on just to start the conversation. I'm not expecting that anyone's going to make a decision, but just decide, do you want to wait and do it in March? That's when you did it last year. And as it gets a little closer, we can put it back on to discuss it again and maybe see what it should look like.
Okay, That's a fair assessment. Anybody else on the board? Comments? Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I think maybe we should consider doing a little later than March, only because it seems like as the weather warms, it seems to be less of an issue with the virus. And then maybe if we're doing it at the community center, maybe we can do it at the pavilion if we think it's advisable, if it's nice weather. So that's why I'm just thinking sometime later than March, like April, May, or even June might be, a better time. That's all.
Okay. And does it have to be a breakfast? Can we do a luncheon? You know, if you want to do it outside per se, like you were alluding to, Rob, maybe doing some sort of a luncheon idea, so that way you're still with the COVID restrictions and stuff. At least we're outside. You're getting that flow of air and everything, so that may make more people come and feel comfortable about attending instead of being inside type of deal. Just a thought. But like Sue said, this is the beginning of discussions and stuff, so think about it and we can bring it up. Go ahead, Yolanda.
Yeah, I definitely think we should push it out. I think we're seeing the numbers are going to drop soon, but some people may still not be comfortable. And I think if we push it out, either do it outside or we'll then be able to do it inside. But so I'm not sure why we started doing it in March. Maybe it's because there wasn't much going on and it was a nice way to get people together toward the end of the winter. But I would say let's push it out to May or June and then go from there and make a decision closer to it.
That's what I was thinking, but that's a great idea. So put some more thought into it and we'll put it on the agenda for our next meeting and then maybe we can we'll fine tune it then. How does that sound?
I'd say let's push it out to our a March meeting and see what's going on.
All right.
I don't think we need to put it on our neck. I think one of the reasons we're pushing it out is because of COVID numbers. Yep. We're not going to know by our next meeting how things are going to be looking in March or April. So I would say let's wait until March and then decide if we want to do it later. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, no, great point. Brandy?
And then just the other thing I wanted to add is that I think all of us would prefer to do it in person versus virtually. So I think by pushing it off and making it later, it would definitely give us more options. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us are really wedded to the March timeframe. So I think we're good waiting a while before we kind of make a decision on this.
No, I agree. I alluded to it when it was brought up at our last meeting that it wasn't like the meetings and the lunch breakfasts that we had before. We went to individual homes and gave out their little baskets and stuff. It was it felt very impersonal, to be very honest with you. And I would like to have an in-person breakfast or luncheon, one way or the other. Steve.
Joe and the rest of the board, I would recommend that we do this, or try to, if it works out, to do it prior to the election, just so that it really reflects this particular board and our appreciation to the volunteers. So may or may not be possible, but that's what I would recommend.
Okay, Susan.
That's basically what I was going to say. I was going to say what Steve was going to say. The other thing I was going to mention is if you decide that you want to do something outside, you have to keep in mind that probably the end of April, beginning of May, soccer starts. So that facility might not be available.
Good point. Okay.
Wait a minute, don't we have seniority?
Yeah, I like the idea of doing it before the election. Thanks for bringing that up, Steve.
That's
good point, Steve. Okay. Well, we can bring it up at our March meeting. Sounds good. So we'll put this on our agenda in March. So think about what you guys want to do. That works for me. I don't know, Michael, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think you all covered it.
Okay. The update on the MWRA water connection agreement. Now, I hope you all read that and you went to sleep on it. I was nodding off every time I turned the page, but it was interesting reading. So, Michael, I'll have you explain it.
It's you know, all of that paper and everything, and it all could be just summed up in a few words. So, as the board has been notified, we have been accepted by the MWRA into their system. This means that we can actually utilize the connection in Southborough, not just for an emergency connection, but for supplemental water. And just for those of you that wonder, okay, what does supplemental water mean? Back at town meeting, I think maybe in 2017, around 2017, we passed a bylaw as well when we approved this connection, the Southborough connection, that regulated when and how we could turn on that water source. So anyway, that's basically, it's codified there. But again, this is a pretty monumental step towards this connection. There's only a couple punch list items, I think, with regards to the actual physical pump. It works. We just need to, again, just do a few punch list items. But for all intents and purposes, the MWRA connection is complete. It's unceremoniously, you know, but sometimes that's what government is.
Good. Yolanda, and then Rob.
Michael, in looking through it, it said there was a certain amount of water that we could use. Do we have to use that? No.
No, it's just the limit, or what we're allotted for gallonage.
Okay.
So, and our permit fee was based on that. So if you also included here was the schedule of the entrance fee, which is $17K a year for 25 years.
Right.
That's based on the 300-something thousand gallons that we'd approved. So it doesn't, I should point out, we don't have to use all of that.
Okay.
And also on the flip side of the coin, if we need to go over that, we will still be able to do that from an emergency standpoint. It's just if we continue to do that too much, the MWRA is going to say like, hey, you know, you might need to look at your permitted gallonage.
So does this connection supersede our emergency connection language that was passed at town meeting?
I don't have the language in front of me, Yolanda,
Okay.
but I believe they work together.
Okay.
Because what happens is when the reservoir level gets to a certain point, that's when we can turn on the supplemental connection.
Okay. Okay. So that still is in place, that we can't just turn it on because we feel like we need more water, or it's still regulated by the level of the reservoir.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Rob.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
that was kind of the questions I was going to ask. Just kind of a refresher of where we are with that. I think one of the concerns has been, you know, we talked about water conservation measures over the year. So I think we just should be clear that we're not stopping the water conservation measures, and we're not doing this to enable more development. It's to, you know, strengthen and protect the water sources we have now, and the kind of, I won't say arbitrary, but the reservoir water levels, sometimes which are influenced by practices that DEP follows, having to do with swimming activities and things like that. So, you know, I think, you know, at least from my point of view, I'm not doing this to enable more development or ensure that we have, you know, more and more water, but it's more to preserve what we have now and to handle these emergencies and deal with the reservoir levels. So is that a fair statement, Michael, of what this does? Or?
That is fair, and I know that was the concern. The concern was if you add more residential housing units to the system, it will draw on that water source more, and we get to that emergency connection stage sooner. And I think, as you pointed out, Rob, there are so many other factors that go into this, so people shouldn't be, you know, concerned that that's the motivation behind this.
Thank you, Michael. Brandy, go ahead.
My question's kind of along the same lines. So there would be a certain level of water restrictions that would go into place before we would use this supplemental connection, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, I don't have the language right in front of me. So there's a couple stages of restrictions, Brandy, that we have.
Okay. So because I'm just, you know, thinking it through and trying to figure out like, okay, so if we're asking residents to restrict things like outdoor watering and car washing and those types of activities, and if it's sort of like the next stage that we would then release like the supplemental water, or is it sort of like on the front end to prevent us from going to like a level 2?
I would rather look at the bylaw completely and have just a more informed answer on that, or correct answer. Right now, I'd just be going from memory from a few years ago. It's not good.
Fair enough. Thank you.
It's Steve. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Joe. My question is a little different, because way back when, Michael, when we started these conversations, one of the concepts that we talked about was the price of water. And, one of the things that's not reflected in the contract, certainly, it only says the price in effect at that particular time. But we did talk way back when about what if the MWRA water is cheaper than the water that we draw from our wells? And, now we never resolved that. I mean, it was just kind of an open-ended question. But, the fact is, water is a commodity like a lot of commodities. And, what is the best fiscal approach to this over time? So, and I don't expect an answer on this. This is beyond the scope of this contract, but I think it goes to, how do we use this water? How do we use this connection? And is there other potential ways to open up the faucet from, that source?
Well, that would require, I believe, a bylaw change. Any of those changes.
No doubt.
So, and I think we would just have to do an ongoing analysis of water use, and then also the cost of water. I do think our water prices are pretty low. It's our sewer prices that are pretty high, but our water price is pretty low. So I think it's going to be really, really hard for the MWRA to beat that. But again, I think it's something that you have to evaluate.
Right. Well, we're talking about basically the cost of production of water, I guess, more so than what we're charging a customer for water today. So another discussion.
Okay.
So, Michael, just to piggyback on what has been asked already, if we don't use the amount of water that's been given to us on a yearly basis by the MWRA, is there a water bank that we could say we only use get so many gallons out of that 350? I'll just use that as an example. We use 200 instead of the 350. So is there 150 gallons that can be put in the bank for the following year, or it doesn't work that way?
No, it doesn't work that way. So you're saying if there's essentially a balance of water,
correct, a balance of the water, right?
Can we carry it forward to the following year?
Yeah.
No, we can't do.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. Any other questions or comments? We don't have to take any action on this tonight, right?
No, it was just an
FYI, right? Okay.
Like I said, it's for such a painstaking initiative, and so many steps had to be completed after that town meeting vote, which was a big lift in and of itself. The fact that it's so, like I said, so unceremoniously unveiled, it's unfortunate, but like I said, that's the way a lot of government stuff is.
Yeah, hurry up and wait. Okay. Next on old new business is discuss the vacancy on the Upper Charles Trail Committee. And that vacancy is from Charles Litz, who recently resigned his position. And Charles, I just want to say thank you for all your efforts prior to you resigning from the committee. We appreciate all the work and your volunteering work to the town and to the Upper Charles Trail. So, discussion on the vacancy.
Just to
go ahead, Mike.
So I was just going to say, just as a precursor to the discussion, I think at one of our retreats in March of last year, there was discussion about the terms, and you know, I think a decision on that was deferred until a later date. So,
Okay.
you might want to include that as part of your discussion tonight.
All right. Go ahead, Yolanda.
So, I mean, I think just as with any vacancy, we're at this meeting, we're letting people know that there's a vacancy on that committee. I do think, as Michael reminded us, that we do need to look at term limits for whoever we put in there. And then do we want to implement those term limits for everyone who's sitting there? I also think as part of this, just, you know, maybe not part of today's discussion, but moving forward, I think it was great, their presentation to us last meeting, but I think they might still be looking for a little more guidance and assistance as to what their next steps as a committee are and how they can implement and move this project forward.
Okay. Thank you, Yolanda. I know that Joel was requesting discussions about certain land acquisitions and possible easements, and that's something that will be done. I'm sure we'll make that happen for sure. Go ahead, Rob.
Oh yeah, thanks. I think we did implement those term limits. I thought I had a term limit, and I would like to hold on to it, you know, if that's okay. So I think we did. So, but we should confirm that before we appoint the replacement. But I thought people were dealing with 3-year terms, but you know.
I don't think we did that, Rob.
Oh,
sorry
okay.
to interrupt. I don't think we did.
Oh, you know what? I think the committee came back and made a recommendation, and maybe we never acted on it. Maybe that's what happened. But I just want to, you know, second Joe in thanking Chuck Lids for his efforts on the committee and his other activities, which he's still continuing with. But and I believe, I think I've seen, or we were sent at least 3 talent bank forms, Susan, and I think the committees, the Upper Charles Trail Committee's meeting tomorrow will at least start looking at those and dealing with the process. I don't know what their intention is in terms of making a recommendation. My own suggestion is they take some time and allow some time to go by and see who's interested. But I know it's on the agenda for tomorrow's meeting.
They're going to be invited, the 3 individuals that have submitted talent bank forms. Are they going to be invited to this meeting?
I'm not sure how Joel's handling it. I just don't remember the agenda. I think it's maybe just on for discussion, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Go ahead, Steve.
So tied to both the Upper Charles Trail and to our previous, and I think we've discussed term limits and maybe changes to committee participation several times, and I think we should revisit that again soon. And particularly in light of comments that were made in the racial equity report about town committees, the participants seem to be appointed over and over and over again, and the opportunities for new people to get involved in committees is limited, or at least the perception from this individual. And I would have to agree. I think many times we rubber stamp committee appointments and it goes on, and I think we need to stop that. I think we need to have a better mechanism for rotating residents into these positions. And so first step, I think, is we need to put term limits certainly to the Upper Charles Trail, if we haven't done that. And then I think we need to come up with a plan for committees in general. And thirdly, I just want to say thank you to Chuck for all of his work. I know he's passionate about the trail. He's passionate about sustainability, and he's just an all-around good guy. So thank you, Chuck.
Thank you. Okay. Anything more we need to do with respect to this, and we'll just move on and wait and see what if they decide to go to several of the Upper Charles Trail meetings and get some sort of response from them as to who they may recommend to fill that vacancy. And then we'll sit and discuss it at a future meeting. That sound good to everybody?
It does.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sounds good to me. Okay. Next, which is near and dear in all of our hearts, is discuss the open meeting law training.
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, this came out of a discussion with the Historical Commission, or some of the Historical Commission members. They had an open meeting law complaint filed against them, and it just kind of triggered the fact that, in my mind, that we haven't done these trainings in a while, and we have a lot of new board and committee members.
Mm-hmm.
So I did talk to Lisa about providing a training for an open training for board and committee members, as well as employees, I guess, or members of the public. And she's agreed to do so. So we're looking at February 28th, which is a Monday. We will be covering, Lisa will be covering not only open meeting law, but also public records law and the conflict of interest law. She anticipates it to last about an hour and a half, and we'll do it virtually. So I hope you all can attend if you want, and we'll make sure that we get that out to different board and committee members and make sure that they are aware of it as well.
Okay. Will those be individual emails, Michael?
Yeah, 7 p.m.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Joe?
Will that correspondence be sent out to individually emails to the committees, or is it just going to be on the website and hopefully everybody reads it?
So we have a listserv with committee chairs.
Okay.
So we'll send that out.
Okay.
Michael, sorry to jump in, Joe.
That's okay.
If there's any way to get it to individual people's emails address rather than just to the listserv, because then you're relying on the chair of each of those committees to make sure it goes to each of their members. I think if we have some kind of list that we can just send it to all appointed people, I think that'd be better than relying. I mean, I know the listserv is good for certain things in regards to going to the chairs, but let's make sure everyone gets it.
Susan, we have we have a list, right, that has all of the committee members on it?
Almost everybody that the select board appoints, I have their emails because we work through a mechanism. That's how I reach out when we're doing volunteer breakfast. That's how I reach out when we're doing reappointments. So we have a chairs and committee, but we also have an individual.
I'd recommend we use that.
Okay. I have no problem with redundancy and send them out both ways, so that way they can't say they didn't get it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. All right. Consent agenda. And on the consent agenda, accept the regular minutes for January 5th, accept cash donations made to the food bank totaling $1,529.40. And let's see, accept donations from the senior center totaling $150, and accept the resignation of Charles Litz from the Upper Charles Trail Committee.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Okay, voice vote, please.
Greaves, aye.
Mitchell, aye.
Sure, aye.
Kinsman, aye.
Mignani, aye, and that would be 5-0.
And if
Thank
I could
you.
just make one comment, Joe, real quick.
Yep, go ahead.
I happened to be sitting on a Lions meeting last night, and it was inferred that if money is sent to the town, it does not get to its directed, directed.
The intention of where the money.
Yeah, the intention that it was
Purpose, yeah.
donated, and I was put out by that because I know that if people donate money, we accept these and it goes to the correct account. So.
Is there someone we can talk to with respect to that? If we're
No,
supposed to do
I'll
it?
talk to the person.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just getting over the top. I'm telling you. Really is.
Priority project updates. Relax.
Oh, I'm
Deep
fine.
breath. Okay. The rail transit district.
Yeah, I don't really have an update on the RTD right now.
Okay. That's still in
Nothing
land court?
Yeah, that's still being fought in the courtroom, I should say. So unfortunately, with downtown, don't believe I've provided a project, the 3-week look ahead in this round, but they're continuing to do some more conduit work. But you'll also see, and I think I mentioned this at our last meeting, you'll see some pretty big concrete structures, and then you'll see like an asphalt berm around them. And those are the foundations for the mast arms, and those asphalt berms are just temporary to keep them protected during
From the plows?
season. Yeah. Well, in just, in general, from cars taking a bum steer somewhere.
Gotcha.
Into that. But, we're continuing to, again, we're going to work as much as we can while the weather will allow us to get most of that underground work done. And, again, the next phase, this hasn't really deviated much since the beginning. Next phase is going to be to pull the equipment in, and meaning the utility equipment, pull that through the conduit, get it all set up, get the connections made to the individual properties, and hopefully energize that up, and everything will go well, and then we can remove the poles. There is that.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Joe? Just...
Yes, Yolanda.
So I have 2 comments regarding downtown, having driven through downtown a couple times today. If our, I understand it's cold, I understand there's a lot going on, but if whoever's directing traffic could actually direct traffic. I was in downtown today, and because of how things were set up, it made it look like I really had to take a left off of Main Street instead of going straight. And in actuality, they were letting people go straight, but because the person who was directing traffic was not making it clear that you could go straight, I wound up having to go all the way around for something. So if you could just get that information out to the people, it's tough enough with the construction that if you're not sure where the detour is going or how you're supposed to be going, it makes it frustrating for people.
Well, thanks for letting me know, Yolanda.
And then the second thing is there were a lot of people standing around looking at stuff today.
There were.
And I'm like, well, okay, do we not know it was a little disconcerting as someone, it's like, are they not sure what they're doing? Are they not sure where it's supposed to go? Are they not? So, yeah.
It was mainly a meet to talk about just the next steps and how we're going to proceed. And I don't know if you saw it. It had members of our DPW, members of
yeah,
GOTO,
there was like 10 people standing there, and I'm like,
yeah. So that they weren't just standing around. They were.
Well, I mean, I could tell they were meeting, but it was one of those things where you drive by and you see all these guys standing there, and you go, okay.
Right. So what you're telling me, it looked like a state job.
Oh, wow.
Well, considering I knew it wasn't that, but it was just one of those things where you go, okay, was that the best place to have that meeting? Yeah, so, right. Anyway. Well, I do thank them because I know it's a tough project with everything going on and how we're trying to manage it and stuff. But it was just, those were 2 things for me. I don't often drive in the middle of the day, so to have that this morning, it wasn't even the middle of the day. It was like 10 a.m. So anyway.
Yeah. Actually,
anecdotal.
If you wouldn't mind indulging me a little bit, just talking about downtown, and I also want to loop in the conversation that we had on the MWRA connection. Doug Small has been a tremendous help with DPW and the MWRA connection. I mean, he's definitely steered that, but I don't think people understand just how involved our DPW has been with this project in order to help save some costs, and then also to make sure that we don't incur more. And Doug's really been spearheading that staff. So I appreciate just you giving me a moment just to thank Doug for the work that he's doing. Sorry.
Thank Doug anytime you want.
I was going to say that's something I think we'd all support.
Absolutely. Anything else, Yolanda? You good? We're good to go? Okay. All right. Moving right along. Yeah. Public Safety and Mendes School Project.
Well, we did have We did have a public safety building meeting yesterday where we looked at a number of different change orders, including the lobby and a lot of other stuff that wasn't as wasn't as interesting, I guess you can say, but just as critical. Actually, I would turn it over to Jen. Jen, if you wanted to provide an update for people.
Sure. So, you'll continue to see the buildings being moved. They're moving. Much of the work is being done inside. There's like a big plastic over, try to make it weather tight, so that the workers can continue to work in the cold months. We're working with Eversource also to try to hopefully get that connection, and that's for our gas connection over the next, if the weather allows us over the winter months, so that we'll be ready to go in the spring. And sort of we're working to review sort of schedule, make sure that the project's moving along, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more information to share in the next coming months in terms of sort of what the spring will look like.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Steve.
So I just want to piggyback with Jen's comments about the Eversource gas line installation. Another example of Doug Small doing yeoman's work coordinating this project that's going to bring gas along that upper Union Street area down to the public safety building. So, you can't give Doug enough credit at this point. So, the other thing I wanted to mention relative to the public safety building, and this relates to the select board, is we're going to discuss and submit a draft for a naming policy for the public safety building to the select board, who will have to approve it. It will probably, I'm going to try to get it on next month's agenda for the committee to review, and then submit it to the board for their review and adoption of it. It's nothing that we already have several versions of this. It's just modified to be specific to the public safety building. The select board has a naming policy. The school committee has a naming policy. It's really mirrored after that, so it should be a fairly easy read and adoption, but we'll leave that for a later date. So that's the only other comment I have about the public safety building at this point.
Sounds good. Appreciate that. So I appreciate you folks discussing 2 out of the 3 comments I was going to make during my board report on the public safety building. So I'll just keep that last one for my report at the end of the night. All right, sounds good. Okay, Route 126 project.
Actually, I have a question
Oh,
on
I'm
what
sorry,
Steve
Yolanda.
said.
Yep.
So Steve, is this a naming policy, or is this a name for the building?
This is a naming policy. The name of the building, as far as I know, is the Ashland Public Safety Facility.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But like many public facilities, there are oftentimes requests to name either a room or some attribute over, let's say, a citizen, a personality from the past, and or there's a lot of places will sell bricks or sponsor a tree. Those are kind of the things that we're talking about, not the naming of the building, but the naming of specific entities.
Okay. And then Joe, if you don't mind, we had a Mendez school building project meeting last night. Could I give a quick
Go
update?
right ahead, please.
Great.
Give us an update.
So the fence around the gravesite is in place to reinforce and to protect the gravesite. A lot of the excavation is getting completed. They are working and reviewing soil as it goes through. They are breaking up some rocks. They aren't going to have to do as much blasting as they had thought, so that's a good thing. But I guess there has been some noise complaints because the actual breaking up of the rock that they're doing is very loud and concussive. So they are being aware of that, and they are talking to the neighbors. They are going to be doing some blasting. They have their blasting permits from our fire department. It'll be happening one blast in the morning and 1 blast in the afternoon, and potentially starting tomorrow. Let's see. Their site offices are getting put in place for the construction companies. They are working with Eversource to get some more temporary power and then some permanent power. And the tree is stored at the Public Works Department. And we're working with someone to make sure it's stored in a way that it will actually be wood that we can use at some point. And that's the update.
Thank you. Yolanda, just a quick question with respect to the blasting in the afternoon. Will that blasting in the afternoon be after the kids leave school?
Yes, it will happen after school is done for the day at the Mendez.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, thank you for that update. Appreciate that. Okay, Valentine Project.
Yeah, don't really have too much more of an update other than where we are. The cabling has been done. Again, I had sent you some pictures. There were a couple of little things that they wanted to add since our last meeting, which they've done. But again, we're at this point, Steve and Brandy are working on the conservation restrictions. The historic restriction is important. I will bring up again, one of the things that Lisa has provided, in addition to comments on the conservation restriction, is language for a home rule petition to remove the Article 97 status from the property. And so I do think that that's going to be part of the conversation, or it needs to be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong or advocating one way or another. I'm just saying that it needs to be determined.
Brandy?
So I just wanted to say, so because we have the feedback from Lisa Mead on the restrictions, Steve and I can look at some dates maybe to set up our next subcommittee meeting. I haven't had a chance to look at Lisa's notes either, so I can't give any feedback on what she had provided, but Steve, maybe we can look at maybe the end of next week if that might work for you, and come up with
let's check in tomorrow when you have some time, Brandy, and we can pick a date or a couple of dates, and make sure we give people enough notice that we're having a subcommittee meeting.
That sounds good. Great.
Okay, good.
And I know you kind of skipped over 126. I didn't know if you were going to go back to that at all, Michael.
Yeah, I'll just go back with some bad news. How's that? So it's nothing too bad. It's just unfortunately we learned that MassDOT would not be able to work on the retaining walls like we had thought over the winter. So I'm still getting some clarification on why that is, and maybe press them to look at that a little bit harder.
That's interesting. Great, Rob.
Just kind of connected with that, did you guys learn any more about that Odessa issue with their transportation? I heard about it from that Facebook posting, and I guess the concern was a lot of truck traffic on 126.
Coming out of Holliston, right?
Yeah, connecting their facility between Framingham and Holliston. I just wanted to know if we need to be concerned about that. Do we know anything about that project? Is that something maybe Peter can evaluate and let us know if there's something we should be monitoring about that? I mean, there was all sorts of discussion on Facebook about all the issues and a lot of heavy truck traffic and things like that. So I just want to know if we know anything about it or can find out how much of an issue this really is.
I believe Pete's, after the last planning board meeting, Pete's looking into this a little bit deeper. Yeah, I believe Odessa wants to expand some of their operations, and they want to have a location in Holliston to hold some of their vehicles. And I think the concern that we have in Ashland is that those trucks that carry those vehicles can be loud and certainly take a toll on the road. And so how many more trips are going to be required if Odessa has this new facility in Holliston, going between Holliston and Framingham? That's one main concern.
Thank you.
I just had, I don't know, Brandy, did you guys want to say something? I'll hold. I just had one other question about this priority
Well, you still have the floor. So
Okay,
I'll get to Yolanda.
Yeah,
and
just,
Brent.
did we drop the Warren Center from this list? Are we done with it? Because
No, we're not. We have, it is dropped on this list, but mainly because we didn't have an update for it for so long.
Okay.
Yeah, I should add that back on.
And my question was that is, you know, we sold the Hall House for 10,000, and we have all these funds. Is that money goes back into one of the funds, or what happens to that? Those proceeds from the sale?
Yeah, so that would go back to the Warren District account.
Warren District.
And actually, I believe Mr. Gustafson, who is doing the Hall House, he actually was able to pull a permit after Doug Scott's rigorous, interrogation of some of his. Well, the plan that was presented initially was not one that was approved by the select board, so we had to make sure that went back and was rectified. So it does look like he's starting that work, and we're looking forward to seeing that restored to its glory. But then, Rob, to your other point, we did get funding from Senate President Spilka and Representative Lewis for the barn, for reconstructing the Warren barn. So we'll be having more information about that as that unfolds.
All right, thanks.
Brandy.
So just as a related topic to the 126 project, the planning board opened up their public hearing on 501 Pond Street this last week. And so for just sort of the benefit of the public, it's 120 unit mixed use, although the commercial component is like crazy small, my personal opinion. And I watched the meeting, and I was surprised at how little public comment came in during the public hearing. They're still going to be taking public comment at the next meeting, but there was more comments from the planning board and questions on the project, and it's the very first meeting of the public hearing, but I just wanted to let folks know that is going on, and if this is right on the Holliston line, right between the residents of Valley Farm and Putz and Moore, basically right on the line. So if folks haven't had a chance to give public comment and want to have their voices heard, they should definitely send emails or be a part of the public hearing process at the planning board. So just want to let people know.
Thank you. Yolanda.
So I'm going to go backwards. So based on what Brandy said, hopefully everyone saw the email from Paula Parker regarding 501 Pond Street. I thought she brought up some really good points, and I know she sent it to us and to the planning board. She brought up things that I had forgotten that we had talked about as to why, what was happening on that corridor. Regarding the Odessa in Holliston, I have reached out to my select board contact in Holliston. We've been trying to get together for coffee to see what she knows. So hopefully once I have something from that, Rob, we'll let you know. They have some open space. They have areas for stuff. So, and then Route 126, Michael. So if they don't do anything, are they going to clean it up a little bit, or are we just going to sit with it in the state that it's in right now?
Yeah, they'll clean it up a bit. I think their main focus has been making sure that entrance onto Spyglass is improved.
And that certainly has been. I think they've done a nice job there, but
yeah, they still need to do a little bit more work.
Yeah,
But yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob, you have your hand raised.
Just one last thing that Randy and Yolanda bringing up the Pond Street project reminded me that we did have that thought about having some kind of public space there, and I still think that would be great if we could incorporate something. So hopefully the planning board's able to work out something like that and then people should make those comments or to weigh in on that.
Yeah.
It is going to be largely residential, I guess, and so it'd be good to have some recreation.
There was quite the concern about the 126 overlay and how they were trying to beat the system by putting a a small amount of commercial space in there. I think there was enough space for a dentist's office or something like that. And then you would just have a total number of, residential complex instead of, what should have been there purposely. Go ahead, Yolanda.
So what I found interesting, and I didn't get a chance to research this, was they were saying that they couldn't do a certain kind of food establishment because with Shaw's right there. So I don't know what that restriction is, and why is that something that Shaw's has, and how can we not fight that? I mean, they have Shaw's has a restaurant right across the street. Why wouldn't there be one there?
There's some type of non-compete agreement, Yolanda, which I haven't been privy to the actual agreement, but I've been made aware of that the Shaw's Plaza owner has with a number of properties around it that basically says you can't have a food establishment with it.
Wow.
And that's not necessarily an abnormal thing. You can find that, I think, in a lot of cities and towns.
I'm sure it is. It's a little disconcerting that they have that much power and over another parcel that we want developed to the best of our ability, and there's this restriction on it from them. That's all.
Right.
I agree with you, Yolanda. Especially when you had, the former Nello's, now you have Los Cabos there, and like you said, Mendes is across the street.
Well, and Mazzie's across the street, so.
Right.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
So I'm assuming that Shaw's had the agreement with Fafford, with the Fafford companies. He's the owner of the property, so that's probably where it lies. But I did attend that first evening of the Pond Street hearing as well. And the thing that I was surprised at and disappointed about was that there was very, very few direct abutters participating in that meeting. And I think there was one woman that was actually in a butter. Mm-hmm. And I had a conversation with friends that live in that development directly behind the site. They had been notified. They did not attend the hearing. They had been notified by the condo association. Right. But when you think about the number of people, the density of population in that area, and there's one resident that comes to this meeting, it's, I think that's problematic. And, I don't want to hear from somebody that lives over on Winter Street necessarily. Right. I mean, everybody's got an opinion. I get it. And they have the right to give an opinion. To me, somebody that lives in that complex has a bigger voice than somebody that lives over on Newcastle Road or on Winter Street, or where does Brandy live, on Green Street, off of Green Street,
Right.
I think, and it's unfortunate, I think I don't know how well the condos do about getting information out to their residents. In this case, our friends said they had been notified. They chose not to attend. So, again, that's an issue. That's a problem.
I think part of it, part of it, Steve, is that depending on where in that complex you live, it's not really going to impact you, right? I mean, if you live on Mountain Gate Road, it's, it's...
Yolanda, it's not the impact so much. It's not the direct impact so much. It is your neighborhood, and it is, and I guess that's the point that I find a little.
Yeah. And the abutter that made the comment was concerned about the fact that she was going to lose her privacy.
Yeah.
Because of the height of the building.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we move on to the next item on the agenda?
Can I just make one comment? Yeah. Just quick comment on what follow up what Joe said about the food establishment. We know at least one prominent kind of tenant at the mill building who was really going to be needing space, and might make a great tenant for that area. I'm not going to name names, but some people are going to need to move out, and this might be a great place for some of them to move to. So, we should think, I'm not sure if there's any way we can directly impact that, but maybe Beth could do some talking about making some space available in that building more than maybe what they're proposing. Just my thought on that.
Well, Joe. Joe, you're muted.
You're muted.
Some people may like that. Town manager's report, is that where you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just looking at the agenda and what items were on the agenda and what items were not, and I was getting a little nervous. So,
what one did you put on there?
I'm sorry?
What one did you not put on there other than the
501 Pond Street.
Yeah.
So, anyway, so first off, police chief search update. So we have developed the candidate profile. We did get a number of survey responses that helped us form that profile. We got some information. We've worked with Chief Mwra, also Lisa, our HR director, and Chief Moore's boss, Paula from Commonwealth Police Legacy, again, to put together this candidate profile, which I will send to the board directly after this meeting. That should be hitting the street tomorrow. If it hasn't today, it will definitely be tomorrow. It will definitely be up on the website tomorrow. From that point, we will leave that open. Well, I should go back. Chief Mwra is going to be posting that in a number of different locations, including the Mass Chiefs of Police Association and other trade associations associated with policing here in Massachusetts. We hope to leave that open for a 30-minute period or 30-day period, a 30-minute period. During that time, we'll also be conducting a focus group that will help us refine our questions to the candidates that do apply. We also will have a screening committee that once the applications come in and the application period is closed, Lisa and I will be doing some an initial review of that, seeing who meets the basic qualifications and not, and then we will be forwarding resumes to an independent screening committee, and a number of great people have agreed to be on that, and I'm just really appreciative. I don't want to name names, even though there's a couple here on this meeting right now that have agreed to be on it, and again, I'm so grateful and thankful for that. Once the hope is they will recommend 2 to 3 finalists to interview, and we'll do a public interview like we did with Chief Davis when Chief Davis was hired, and hopefully make a decision soon after that. So, any questions? Okay.
So you mentioned, I'm sorry, Michael, before you go on, you mentioned something about Chief Mwra getting in contact with individual board members.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot it. So Chief Mwra should, you should be meeting with Chief Mwra, I think, in 15 minutes, and I think Diane's going to help set those up. Set those meetings up. 15, 20 minutes.
Will it be Zoom meetings, or can we meet in person, or is it, are you more?
We said virtually.
Yep.
But I think if you feel more comfortable in person, I think we could certainly arrange that too.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. You have some good news to tell us.
Yeah. So we were informed last week that we were once again awarded the Distinguished Budget Award for 2022. This one is especially special because there's a lot more requirements that Brittany needed to meet in the budget document to receive that award, and she did. And I think it's just important to note that, you know, Brittany's office is an office of 2, and not only is she the finance director, she's the town accountant, which carries with it some pretty heavy statutory responsibility, independent of the town manager and actually the select board or FinCom. So, you know, the fact that she's able to put together a budget document that's so transparent and so informative that it receives an award like this, I think is a real good credit to her work ethic and her talents. So We'll be having, I think, a more formal, I don't want to use the word ceremony, but presentation, I think, at our next meeting. So I'm looking forward to that. And then moving on to COVID updates. Just for our statistics, in total in Ashland, we have had since the pandemic started, we've had 3,022 confirmed cases, and 2,867 of those have cleared. That was kind of a staggering number when I first saw that. You look at the aggregated effect, the aggregated numbers here. It's pretty important. Our vaccine data is also in that as well. Currently, we have a total. Our population is listed as 19,700. We have 15,600 of those have been fully vaccinated, and so that's about 79%. And if you look at just the partially vaccinated individuals, we have 1,840 of those, which is about 9%, excuse me. So in total, we're around the between the 85 and 90% range with at least one vaccination. So I thought that was pretty important as well. Pretty noteworthy.
For sure.
I would also say that Ed is looking at putting together a booster clinic, Moderna booster clinic, and I think he's put information out on our social media pages and our website.
I think he just sent one along next week, I think.
I believe it is.
Tomorrow there's a clinic, I think, is what he said.
Okay. The 20th?
I believe it is.
That was tomorrow, but
that was tomorrow. Okay, which is the 20th. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up.
Oh, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Just, so, Michael, there's we had that concern from the restaurant owner, and you had told them that we're constantly evaluating the situation, and since we last met on this 2 weeks ago, a number of other Framingham, Natick, Southborough, now Paulson have all implemented mandatory mask mandates. So I guess I'm wondering, I think people know my position on this. I think we should have implemented that ourselves. And I guess I would ask the board, is there any support for reconsidering that and now implement our own mandatory indoor mask mandate? I still think it's important to do, and it would be very helpful to help public safety and to reduce the incidence of infection. I think, hopefully we won't have to do this for very much longer, but I think this is a critical time. And so, I would just ask if there's any support for reconsidering that and making it a mandatory. I've noticed that in several places, there's very little mask wearing going on, even though we've made a strong recommendation 2 weeks ago. So, that's just my question to folks. Is there any support for that? Is that something we could consider reviewing at this meeting?
Before the board gets into that, could I just add one piece of information that might be helpful? I did have that same business owner that I had forwarded you his concern. He did reach out to me today and let me know that a number of business owners felt the same way that he did. And so what I've asked him to do is I've asked him to put together a letter to the Board of Health and the Select Board, just explain their concern and what they wish, and then have essentially, I don't want to call it a petition, but have the other business owners sign on to it. So I think that might help the board evaluate a decision.
Go ahead, Steve.
So to answer Rob's, I guess, request, I'm not speaking here to support your mandate request.
No.
My comments are relative to what's going on now with the data, and what's happening with the positivity factor and so on. And you know, a lot of the information that we're looking at shows that we've peaked, and we're now on the downside of this in terms of the positive test results. Now, that doesn't mean we should stop wearing masks or we shouldn't be concerned. That's not what I'm suggesting. But to go to the whole mask, the use of masks, in Massachusetts, at least the data that I'm looking at, only half of the population is really using masks. So whether you put a mandate in or not, you're not going to, it's the same, I guess it's the same dynamic. If you're not vaccinated today, you're not going to get vaccinated forever. And if you don't wear a mask today, for whatever reason, you're not going to wear a mask anyway, even if it's, in my opinion, whether it's mandated or not. So, you know, I think we have to look at some of this data too and try to assimilate what the best policies are. I'm not in favor of mandates in general. You know, we spoke about this at our last meeting. Why don't we mandate vaccinations if we were going to go that route? You know, but that's my synopsis.
Anybody, you're good, Brandy.
So I was curious if the Board of Health has met since our last meeting 2 weeks ago, and sort of if they've, you know, got to reconsider, because I've seen the other mask mandates come out in other communities, and it seems like it's really coming from the Board of Health rather than the select board of the communities. So I'm curious if they've met and if, you know, they're looking to take a vote on something like this, making a change to the policy.
Not that I'm aware of.
And you're right, Brandy. The most recent one was Celpro. They've mandated, but at the same token, the enforcement factor was a concern for them. They weren't sure how they were going to enforce it. They felt it was imperative to have the mask mandate for people to feel comfortable going into restaurants, and again, it comes, what I said at our last meeting was, it comes down to common sense. If you don't wear a mask, you wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, be prepared for, you know, the unforeseen things that can happen to you or to your family. I mean, I don't know what the results are going on with respect to school. I know the kids are wearing masks and the teachers are wearing masks, but right, we've hit a peak and it's slowly going down. But if people don't wear masks, is that going to plateau off and then, you know, rise up again, you know, sooner than later? There's always that room for error, and again, it comes down to common sense. If you should wear a mask to protect you and your family, then do so. You know, if we mandate it, we can't enforce it. So what do you do?
I did feel, you know, when we received that email from the business owner here in town and his concerns about, you know, preferring us to issue a mask mandate versus having the businesses require masks, you know, it made me think, because I know when we had talked about it, one of the things that we had talked about was not putting the burden on the businesses. And so if it, you know, from my perspective, if, you know, I think masks are important. I think it's I think it's an important way to combat COVID. But so if the Board of Health was moving in that direction, I would support that, because I think that our intention was to not have the burden put on the businesses, and I think inadvertently we did. So so that's my personal take.
Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Then
just a comment on what Brandy just said. I mean, you know, we agreed on a recommendation in an advisory, and that business owner has all the power to mandate his business with masks, and I would assume he has. And if he hasn't and is writing a letter like that, then I think shame on him. But I think, you know, he has that ability to do that regardless of whether we're recommending it or not. He could always have done that. And any business has the capacity to do that. And, you know, to me, I feel strongly we should be allowing business owners, relative to the conditions that exist right now and that are changing daily, let them make the decisions.
But we also have a Board of Health that should help that situation along as well, you know, for guidance and direction. And I think, you know, we're stepping on their toes a tad, even though we had a joint meeting at our last meeting with respect to that. And I think somebody's gonna, you know, stand up tall and make a decision either way, one way or the other. And again, I go back that I have no problem wearing a mask. I mean, we went out to eat a few times this past week, and the two establishments that we went to, all their most of the customers inside were wearing masks when they came in. When they sat down, they took them off. But every single one of the workers inside the establishments were wearing masks. So, you know, and kudos to the owners of those locations that, you know, hey, they're thinking about their workers too. I mean, what happens if they all come down with COVID? They have to shut down. They're not making money. You know, that's why the governor doesn't want to make that mandate. He doesn't want to force people to shut their stores down, their establishments down. He doesn't want that to happen. So again, it comes back to what I said earlier, common sense. And I would hope the Board of Health would reconsider what they're doing. It's going to be an unenforceable mandate, but that's where I'm at right now. So, go ahead, bro.
No, just one last, and I'll just a couple points. I think the thing about mandates, it does support businesses because they can use us as their authorization. I think that's important. And, you know, we also have employees to worry about if the boss does not think it's important, but at least there's a mandate, so that protects the employees. And I would just say, yes, I think that was a good move, a joint meeting with the Board of Health, but I think ultimately it can also be our responsibility. In Framingham, Mayor Sisitsky just decided to do it, and the Board of Health followed him, you know, and backed them up eventually, but they weren't going to do it on their own. I think there's also a timing issue here. I'm not sure what the Board of Health. So I'll just make it simple. I will make a motion to authorize the town manager to write up an indoor mask mandate policy and issue it, you know, within the next few days. And, you know, I would just ask if there's a second for that. If there isn't, we can move on. But that would be my motion.
I'm not hearing a second.
What's the appropriate time to wait for a second?
I think you have to wait 2 hours.
Well, then we're going to go beyond 10 o'clock, and that's not happening.
All right, I will move on then.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
But I think, you know, to go on Mike's point, if you are keeping those records and we could talk to the Board of Health, I think time is of the essence. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I don't disagree with you. Okay, thank you. Moving on. FYI 23 budget.
Yeah, I have two more items, and this is one's not on the agenda. But so the FY23 budget process is continuing. It's ongoing. Brittany and Jen and I have a meeting set for next week to review all the departmental submissions, look at what recent data that we have from the state and other outside factors like Keith Tech. Right now, I haven't heard anything from the state. Obviously, it's pretty early. But one of the things that, well, after the governor released his budget numbers, then the legislature will have a turn at it. And I'm hoping that the legislature will do what they've done in the previous couple of years, which is come to a consensus pretty early in the process on what local aid is going to be, so we at least know what we're working with. As you know, state budgets here take a long time to be completed. Sometimes it extends beyond the June 30th fiscal year, but that's one of the things that they're usually pretty good about, so hopefully that'll happen again. So any questions on the FY23 budget?
No? Go ahead, Yolanda.
Have we heard anything from the schools, Michael?
The only thing that I have heard is with relation to some special education costs and some.
And then should we be planning a tri-board meeting, even if there's nothing to really talk about, just to sort of get us all on the same page as to where we're at? I mean, I feel like we haven't done those recently, and I feel like, I don't know, disconnected from the whole discussion, so.
I think at the last meeting I said we would more than likely need to have one.
Okay.
About a specific issue. I think it'll be interesting to see how the special ed costs factor into the budget discussion this year.
So if we could look at dates for that, and I mean, I don't know about other people, but I know, it's the spring, so calendars fill up and things fill up. So if we could start looking at a potential date for that tri-board meeting and pick it sooner rather than later, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
I don't disagree, Yolanda. Good point.
And then the last thing I had is that, as you all know, we're embarking upon an effort to look at an inclusionary zoning change in our bylaws, zoning bylaws. And so as part of that, we will be putting out a survey for people, and to get some input on inclusionary zoning. And we'll put that out via our website and then also social media.
Is that why that zoning was in our packet?
I don't know why it was in the packet.
Okay, I'm like looking through it. I'm like, I'm not seeing anything relevant to this in our packet. So on our agenda. So
threw me for a loop too. But again, this is to look at inclusionary zoning and more important, inclusionary housing for all Ashland residents, and this would apply mostly to new development in town. But again, I think it's a very important initiative that the board has decided to undertake and advocate for.
Thank you. Go ahead, Brandy.
So just to kind of piggyback on that, the survey is going to be out for about 3 weeks. So there's going to be plenty of time to get public input. And then the group that is working on the inclusionary housing bylaw with MAPC will take that information, and we will craft a draft of the bylaw. And the goal is to have this for spring town meeting. One of the questions that I had, just because we're trying to work backwards from spring town meeting, is do we have a date yet when the warrant is going to, like the closing date for the spring town meeting warrant?
No, we'll have the guidance we'll open the warrant and issue the guidance at the next meeting. But so Brandy, just as a good rule of thumb, so town meeting is by charter the first Wednesday in May. For an annual town meeting, we're required to post the warrant a week in advance. But what we try to do is we try to get it set up to where we close and post the warrant 2 to 3 weeks in advance of that. And I think we've been pretty consistent with that.
Okay, all right. That's just important because it's a zoning article. It would need to go in front of planning board and a hearing and all that stuff too. So, and then, of course, we'd want to make sure that we have a chance to look at that ourselves and review it before it goes to the planning board stage. So just that's helpful from a time perspective, and it saves me in my board report. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
That's all you have, sir. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to comment.
Oh, go ahead, Rob.
Just quickly in the inclusionary zoning, that's good about the survey. I thought they came up with an excellent list of targeted locations for housing. And I would, just my own personal opinion is I hope that the inclusionary zoning is directed and controlled and not just blanket over the whole town. That's just my thinking on that. And anyway, so thanks for that.
That's good feedback, Rob. I think that the thought was that it would be town-wide, that the inclusionary zoning was going to be that, that was going to be how it was going to be written, but that's good feedback, and we can
Sure.
take that back.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Mr. Town Manager, for your reports. And now it's board report time. So, Ms. Yolanda, if you would, please.
Had to unmute. Well, originally I was going to be saying that I'm going to be going to the MMA, but now it's happening virtually, so I'll be sitting in on some of that. And then next week we have a Metro West Regional Collaborative meeting on Thursday. And through the collaborative, we are meeting with, I believe, the Secretary of Housing in February to give him input and to have a discussion about the directive that came out from DHCD regarding the MBTA community zoning. Once I have the specific date for that, I can let people know if they want to sit in on it.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yep. Rob.
Steve told me I could only say one thing, so I'm going to keep this brief.
That was.
I only have one thing to say, so
okay.
It's good for the goose.
Yeah, there you go. Just quickly, the first meeting of the MBTA Advisory Board Commuter Rail Committee is coming up. It's just after our next meeting. I think it's February 10th. So if anybody has any, we're going to be, the new general manager of Keolis will be there, talk about commuter rail issues, and, you know, this person's new, I guess. So if anybody has any thoughts, you know, I'm going to ask about a number of general things, but also the station maintenance issues and the capital plan for stations and their thinking. But if people have other thoughts about commuter rail or concerns or questions, you know, get them to me before that meeting. I think it's February 10th. So we'll be meeting. It's right after our next meeting. So anyway, that sounds like a good thing to establish communication with Keolis. It's been a few years since we heard from them. So, and they're likely to keep the contract for a while, I understand, because I think they decided to extend the commuter rail contract rather than rebid it because it's so complicated. So anyway, more on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Stephen.
Thank you, Joe. So just one item tonight, and I'm glad that Makita is still on the meeting, or at least her picture is, because this goes directly, I think, to inclusion, community inclusion, and engagement. And the issue, and this is something I've been thinking about for quite some time, I'm sure you're all aware that recently New York City voted, the mayor and the town, I guess it's the city council, voted to allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. And you probably are aware that the Massachusetts House of Reps there's a bill under discussion that allows cities and towns to allow non-citizens to vote in local and state elections. I'm not a big fan of the bill as it's written, but you know, my feeling is that, you know, we have, and I don't have data for this. I don't know how I'm going to get data for this, but we have many residents that are green card holders, that are legal permanent residents. We have residents that have that status, that own homes, pay taxes, and support our community, but they can't vote at town meeting, they can't vote in town elections, and they can't vote they can't run for public office. I think there's something wrong with that, and I think under limited parameters, I believe that this is a direction we should be moving in. And you know, I would really love to see Ashland take some kind of lead in this, and I'm not suggesting at this point anything specific. From my perspective, we need some more information, but my gut sense is that there's a lot of residents that are in this category. And when you think about just reflecting on the discussions about 100 Chestnut Street, and you've got that whole complex in the back that has a very significant Asian population that live in those condos. And my gut sense tells me that there's probably a good percentage of residents there that have green cards. And they can they have standing in our community, but they have no effect or impact on the zoning that goes on in that particular neighborhood. So for me, there is something wrong with that. And so you're going to hear more about this in the future. So that's my tune tonight, Joe.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for bringing that up. We should look into that further than, especially with the conversation that we had earlier this evening. So for sure. Brandy.
So I'm going to be extremely short tonight. I just wanted to let people know that next Tuesday, the 25th, is the first day that people can pull papers in the town clerk's office to run for the May election cycle. I know the town clerk has all the positions on the website that are going to be available for May elections. So I just wanted to let people know they will need to make an appointment to go pull papers, but I would encourage folks to get out there and run for elected office. And on that vein, I'm going to be there to pull papers next week, so I'm excited to announce that I'll be running for another 3 years. I can't believe it's been 3 years already. It's like it feels like both the shortest and longest 3 years that I've ever had in my entire life with COVID.
It's a hell of a time, Brandy.
No kidding, right? So, but that's all I got. So next Tuesday is the first day.
Good for you. Thank you. I'll be behind you. All righty. Quickly, just to add to the public safety building update, and we discussed it quite lengthily. So I guess what we were looking at, the potential finish date, completion date has been pushed back a bit. And so on or about June 15th or maybe July 15th, this project could be completed. Hopefully, I have my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, that there'd be no further setback with respect to supplies, because that's been the issue, getting supplies and the needed materials to complete the project on hold via either transportation issues or supply issues, lack of. We'll be meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust will be meeting next week. We will be, the continued discussion of the inclusionary zoning bylaw will be a major discussion, and we'll be working with the state to try to receive, be granted additional funding through grants and other promotions that they're providing for housing and affordable housing in our area. So that's one of the other things that I would like to bring out. And again, I wrote this up, and I'll just make sure that we had this discussion earlier. Remember wearing your mask if you can during any public building meeting that you have to go to. Remember, you have to make an appointment to visit town buildings. Make sure you do so. And lastly, I would like to send the entire board's condolences to the Irucci family. Marianne Irucci passed away this last week, and you know, she was the matriarch, and she lost her husband a few months ago, a little bit, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So they're both together again and looking down, and I'm sure they're all proud of their families and Ashland for what we're doing, what we'll continue to doing. So again, my condolences to the entire Irucci family. Our thoughts and prayers with you all. That's all I have tonight. Yeah, Brandy, I will be making an appointment to visit the town clerk's office and around one more time. We'll see what happens. And the good Lord will give me the health to do it, and I'll be willing to do it. So with that, I thank you all for all the work that you've done this week and continued work. And thank you to all the folks who came in front of us tonight. We appreciate all the work and that you have done through the committees that we're here this evening. Continue it. Don't sit on your laurels, like I said earlier, and don't worry about the noise and naysayers. We're going to get those no matter what. Just be proud of what you're doing and continue doing it, and stay focused on the goal. The goal is to make Ashland better and moving forward in town in the future. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Voice vote, please.
Reeves, aye.
Mitchell, I.
Beer, aye.
Kinsman, aye.
Mignani, aye. Thank you all. Good night, and stay safe.
Night, everybody.
Night.
Night, everyone.
Wear your
Good night.
masks.